Hello, good afternoon. It's great to be here. My daughter told me I wasn't here as the stand-up act, so you'll be spared jokes and singing. But I think I'm most probably here because I was one of the original gang who helped dream up this crazy idea of doing something on our sand dunes across the country to kind of kickstart them back into life. And it's my absolute privilege that I'm here today to see the team in front of me and the tremendous work, especially Verity and her gang, have done to pull this off. So I've just been asked to spend a few minutes to give you a bit of context setting. So it was back in 2015 we had our first meeting in the Plantlife office. I used to work for Plantlife then. And it was great fun. The infectious enthusiasm of Andy Byfield, who had been playing around and making a bit of a mess in Kenfig. And we had this real appetite to extend that experience, to demonstrate the potential of what could be done. And so on one grey autumnal day, we walked up Whitehall and banged on the door of various government officials and started the conversation that we're going to do a sand dune project. They weren't massively enamoured. Brexit was high on the agenda, and EU funding was seen to be a bit kind of out of sorts. And it did throw up a bunch of challenges. We had to do some contingency planning, because what happens if we leave the European Union? We needed to build a partnership, and it was quite a challenge to understand who we should be engaging with and how we should maintain a focus around really restoring our sand dunes and the special wildlife that it supports. There was a lot of work trying to get Scotland and Northern Ireland into the mix. We were determined, I was absolutely determined to do this at the UK level, but, you know, the winds were against us, and unfortunately, Scotland and Northern Ireland had other priorities and we couldn't tempt them in. But we ended up with a perfectly formed partnership across England and Wales. We were bold and ambitious in those early days, trying to scope. We could do all of the sand dunes. And I remember my finance director at the time saying, no, we can't. But we did really want to focus on the dynamism of improving our important dune systems, to demonstrate that kind of bold, innovative conservation techniques that we've been trialling at a few sites along with others. And we wanted to kind of create new opportunities to celebrate and engage people in sand dunes. At the time, they were losing interest. And we were very focused on tackling the major threats facing our sand dune systems: stabilisation, eutrophication, the special species that sand dunes can and should be supporting. And ultimately, we wanted to improve the condition of these designated sites, because many of them are. There was a sense, I'm not sure if this is fair, but there was a sense certainly at the time that these were kind of slightly unloved and forgotten places, that they were in the too difficult pile. They were neither marine nor terrestrial. Agri-environment schemes at the time didn't really cater for them very well. And we were very keen to try to reopen the conversation, to reinvigorate that interest in sand dunes across the community, and to help reconnect those individuals who are doing amazing, sterling work, but maybe a little bit on their own and felt a bit isolated. We also recognised that it was a bit of an overlooked space, and actually might not be able to see that On the Sands by Lowry. And I hope I don't get sued, because I've at least recognised where it comes from. But we recognise that the communities who live on our coastal fringe around these sand dunes are often impoverished in one way or another. They're often elderly. And so we were really keen to think outside of the box and develop new ways of engaging these kind of communities, to it was kind of before things like Nature Connection were on every civil servant's list, and biophilia and all of those kind of good things, which are now second nature, were kind of in the shadows somewhat. And I'm really glad that the project has ended up with a really compelling engagement program to work with those kind of communities. But there was a challenge. We could only have one government-supported EU bid, and there were some pesky birders in the room. And we were up against it with some very nice colleagues of mine from the RSPB who wanted to do a wet grassland project. And, I wasn't having any of it. So we subtly and quietly persuaded them that they could go and get some fields soggy without millions of pounds of funding. And actually the bigger conservation need was on our sand dune systems. And to their credit, they backed away and we were left in the lead, winning the support of government. 1, 2, 3 and 4 because you've been busy doing it, and I'm incredibly grateful for your efforts, your professionalism, your enthusiasm, your skills. I think we have started or restarted a conversation around sand dune conservation in the UK, and it's absolutely brilliant that people from all of our organisations have been busy nipping off to Europe to understand what's going on there, to build those networks, to develop the best practice and bring that home to try to roll that out here. I'm absolutely delighted that we managed to pull off 10 million or thereabouts in funding for sand dunes. I think that's the biggest amount of kind of single injection into sand dune conservation that we've had. And the challenge, of course, now is what we do next, because we did end up leaving Europe, and those funding streams are no longer accessible to us. So I hope that will not depress us, but just give us a real focus to build on the success of sand dune. We've got another 12 months to go to really consolidate the kind of expertise and enthusiasm and take that to the next stage post 2024. But finally, I just wanted to thank you, especially Verity and her team. I remember interviewing Verity and coming out thinking she seemed like a solid and safe pair of hands, and then very quickly backed away and said, "It's your baby." And for me, Verity, I owe you huge appreciation and thanks for steering us through such tricky waters at times and holding us together. And she does a miraculous job, and so does the wider NE team for steering it all. So thank you for them. I would be remiss of me not to shout out for Bethan, who has been more than my right-hand woman. She's kept me on the straight and narrow, told me what I need to do when, and kicked me when I haven't done it. So thank you very much. She's done an amazing job navigating the complexities of the National Trust to make sure that we deliver our part of the bargain. But also to the other partners, NRW, Plantlife, of course, Natural England. Thank you all. We smashed it. Pass you on to Luc. Thank you.
Welcome everybody, and I want to thank the organization for inviting me here so that I could be here live and kicking and enjoy this famous scenery. And public at home can't see it, but it's a pity you can't be here. I also want to thank my co-authors, Bas Arends, who did a lot of work on this presentation, the science behind it, and Mark van Til, who brought a poster and brochures for you on the small-scale regeneration of blowouts. So that's in the exhibition room. So I can focus on the notches today. Some of you don't know the Dutch situation maybe, so short introduction on our land. We have 40,000 hectares of dunes in the Netherlands, so a relatively small part, of course, but we're relatively big when you see it on a European scale. And they're big nature reserves. 89% now is protected under European legislation, being the Habitat Directive or Bird Directive. So they are well protected nowadays, and that's a great advantage for the dunes. But the other side, of course, and you know the Netherlands is laying below sea level for large parts. It's always coastal safety first for our dunes. Without dunes, without dikes, we would be very wet in our country. So, I want to come back to the title of my presentation, Notches in the Sand Dike. Are we going crazy? And I want to ask your opinion about that. So, can you raise your hand when you think, yes, the Dutch, they are completely crazy? Can you raise your hands? 1, 2, 3. I think rather polite audience. B then, no, they don't know what they're doing. They're clever guys. Nobody. Oh, okay. And then last, maybe you don't have a clue. Yes. So this presentation is especially for you. I hope that after this presentation you can choose for A or B. I don't know the answer. Future will bring it, I think. I don't know what we're doing is clever or not. But let's go back to nature. Already told that there are big troubles with our nature and values. Biodiversity, we are in a crisis. And we're working on recovery of that. The situation, the habitat types are in unfavorable or bad conditions. And so we are thinking about what to do. And I'm glad that we're here coming together and have meetings with like this. We can exchange ideas. We have a meeting on invasive species tomorrow. We have a meeting on grazing this afternoon, which will work on biotic quality recovery, I think. And I'm glad we start this presentations with the notches, because that's the number one increase of dynamics and landscape diversity. That's the number one thing we have to work on, I think. And I want to show you this picture and go a bit deeper in this thing. In the past, because of coastal safety issues, we changed our 4 dunes, and I deliberately didn't talk about notches in the 4 dunes. I talk about notches in the sand dike, because our 4 dunes were changed by planting mountain grass and reprofiling to sand dikes, and that's on the lower part of that picture. And the other approach is, of course, that when you let nature go and improve your dynamics, you get a situation in the upper part of the picture with longer gradients, with dynamics, and habitats rejuvenating again. So that's the challenge we have in the Netherlands. And just to show you in practice, we have a big change in policy in the 1990s, where national governments said, okay, we hold the line, we don't approve that the Netherlands become smaller, coastline should stay in place. It was done by sand nourishments, so a lot of sand, ships coming in with sand and bringing to the coast, first in beach nourishments, and later on more and more foreshore nourishments. And each year, the Dutch bring 12 million cubic meters sand from North Sea to the coastline, just to keep up with sea level rise, that our coastline also rises with that sea level rise. After about a decade or 20 years, we saw that sand contributed to the beaches, contributed to the 4 dunes, the dikes, but didn't really contribute to the dunes behind it. So the weren't dynamics in these dunes behind the dike. And the policy then became, and it was mostly initiated by the nature managers, can we do it in a different way? A more dynamic coastal management, and more dynamic for dune management. And at the sand dike, blowing again and contributing in this way with the growing dunes and also with habitat rejuvenation. So that was the idea and the challenge we are standing for. And different kind of habitats can profit from that situation. Your embryonic dunes in front of the dunes, the white dunes, which are stabilized at this moment, and the marron grass is growing, but it's not very well. There's not much sand in between, and the gray dunes, by bringing sand over it in different quantities, more wind dynamics, more salt dynamics. So that will bring biodiversity back in our dunes. And it didn't happen spontaneously. The dike grew and was stabilized more and more. So we start digging notches in our dikes. This is an example of Noordvoort, near the city of Zandvoort, where we made about 12 in the last few years ago, was another 7 of these kind of notches. And it was really a management where we were learning by doing. We didn't do that before, so we had to find out how it would work. If it would work, we didn't know. And here you can see also that it's a steep dike and a small gradient. And here we experiment a bit with the position of the knot, where to lay them high in the dike or not. And they started to work. Some better than others. Those who were connected with the beach worked better than the high and smaller ones on top of the dike. But so we gained this knowledge from this kind of experience. This project, the monitoring of it costs as much as the project itself, about 100,000 euros or so. We also asked ourselves, how deep should we dig? In Noordvoort, we didn't dig that deep, so 1 meter, 1.5 meters or so, and watch what happened. You can see that it deepens about 1 meter a year in this period. On the other side, colleagues at the National Park of South Kennemerland, they did also a famous project. It's called the Northwest Natuurkern, colleagues from PWN. And they dig very deep. They make real big holes in our dikes. And you can see also erosion takes part, but there you can see that they formed it in a V shape, and the erosion made it more U-forms. In our project, it didn't work at the start. When you dig not too deep, you get your root problems. And marron grass resprouts, dewberry resprouts, so you get a rather quick fixation. So it's not doing it just like a 1-year project, but you need some assistance afterwards. So aftercare management, and we did some with our volunteers who very much loved this project. They were real ambassadors of the project, and that's a place to work. With a view like that, it's great. So they loved it very much and did a good job, as we can see on the first pictures. We also tried bringing horsepower in, a dynamic approach of the management. It's nice pictures for your publicity. But nowadays we do it in a more relaxed way. The manager stands on top of the dune with his joystick, and then the remote control machine does the work for us. So that's a much easier way to do your aftercare management. Okay, the Northwest Natuurkern, here a picture of it, and you see the huge notches bringing the sand in the dunes. And it's proven that it works by the University of Utrecht Gerben Reusing did research on it. He monitoring the height models. And in blue, you can see where the situation was eroding. And in red, where the accretion of the sand. That's so the sand will blend inward. But when you count that blue and red, you see that extra sand came in. So from the beach, sand transported into your dunes. So it strengthens your dunes. So that was one of the issues which was part of the deal for our coastal safety. We shouldn't weaken our dunes. Another experience was made in Mijndel, more to the Hague direction. Here the nourishment caused another sand dike in front of the former sand dike. And here also they did some experiments with different forms and different kinds of notches, and also digging through the new formed and embryonic dunes and new formed dike. So we had several projects in the Netherlands, and we now even have more man-made notches than the natural notches. But the good thing is, when you're going out and look at them, you won't distinguish the ones made and the ones which were natural. So it's a very quick development to a very nice scenery. You can't see that man interfered in that situation. We found out the complex situation with the nourishment, and we want to have sand in the system, but not too much, because you get new dike building in front of your old ones. We have found out that we can make blowouts high in the dike, and that they will go deep in themselves and make connection to the beach. Aftercare management is a real key thing to do. So we have to do, for example, 3 or 4 or 5 years after the first digging, and that depends on how deep you dig. I mean, the example of the deep digging, they hardly have to do anything. When you deep 14, 15 meters deep, it's not necessary anymore to do, but it's more expensive, of course. And when you have any morphology left in your system, connect to that morphology. I mean, you have some parabolic dunes, for example, it's good to make a connection to that. This experience in the Netherlands from the past 10 years was gathered, and it's printed nowadays, the guidelines and manual for the dynamization of 4 dunes. You can find it on the internet, but it's in Dutch. That's a problem maybe for most of you. But I sent it around for some of the connections we have here, and the smart guy from Denmark, he can't be here, for example, but I hope he's listening today. Jeppe, thank you very much. Within an hour, he came back with a translated version. We put it into Google Translate, and he got it back. So I think, oh, well, I'm getting old, so I think that use the internet, use the internet. But when you want to have the translated version, it's a bit Denglish, I think. It's not real English, but you can read it, I think, and understand it. So when you want to have that copy, I can send it to you. But Jeppe made me realize I should use the internet more. So when I was preparing for this presentation, I thought, well, I can write my own conclusions, but I can ask the internet. And I can ask the famous chat GTP, artificial intelligence. It solves your problems. And I'm glad with the conclusions at the end. When you're thinking about projects like this, it's always site-specific. It's always tailor-made. And, of course, we are needed. We are needed. We are specialists. We are geomorphologists. We are ecologists. We are site managers. We should work together on preparing this kind of plans and projects. So that's very nice. And I got a bit enthusiastic about the ChatGPT knowledge gathered from all over the world. So I also asked him, well, what do you think about dynamic dunescapes? I'm going to do the dynamic dunescapes meeting. What? And I have to congratulate you. I really have to congratulate you. You're an example for projects around the world. working on dune conservation and restoration projects like you did is really big stuff. I really have to come. So I hope this message brings it to the end, and then you can take it on Thursday when you can make your conclusions. And then this one, I think we can skip because we have a Q&A afterwards. But we all love mobile dunes, I know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luke. That was very interesting to see what's going on in the Netherlands. My name's Andy Nelson. I work in Cornwall in the engagement team, and just seeing what you put up there about ChatGTP, I wonder if we could get ChatGTP as part of the engagement team. It seems like they're doing quite a good job. So we're going to take the focus of notching work to Dunescapes, what we've been doing, what's coming up, and think a little bit about what notching is. So I think we've got a slide, first slide about, it's me, thank you. There we go. So Luke's been talking about notching. So we thought probably good just to think about, does everyone know what that is really? So the technique cuts like a kind of a V shape or U shaped notch in the foredunes, as you can see in those pictures. And the idea is to funnel wind into a site at a particular point. So that increases wind speeds and sand supply to the site. So we're trying to sort of funnel wind and the sand with it from the front of the dunes a bit further back into the dunes. So this is typically used on sites that are over-stabilised and where there's a need to improve conditions for the natural dune dynamics. It might be used in combination with turf stripping when you're stripping the surface vegetation off around the area as well. So a constant supply of blend sand can help things with the soil pH, keeping that high, and encouraging these early successional species of plants, the ones that are really adapted to those areas of foredunes. Might not be suitable everywhere though. So there are certain sites where notching probably isn't what you want to do. You might have, so for example, in the East Coast, the wind direction is more often blowing towards the sea rather than from the sea onto the land. So as I think Luke mentioned at the end there, or ChatGTP said, every site is different and you have to think about what you do if it's suitable. We've had notching work happen. You can see here the yellowy colour arrow on the left. That happened about a couple of years ago at Oxwich at Wales. So that's the first notching in our project. And then about a year ago up on the Sefton coast, Izzy's going to talk about that in a little while. There's notching at National Trust site in Sefton and also Natural England site at Ainsdale. And then just earlier this year, Rupert's going to talk about this in a bit, Rupert Hawley, and that's just out here, just down the coast here at Bronson Dunes. There's been notching happening here as well. We're also planning some for Cornwall, and I'll talk a little bit about that at the end, about the sort of engagement work around that for Cornwall. So, notching, lots going on, lots happened, more to come. And I think, if you're okay to do the next bit, thank you.
Cheers, thanks. Thanks, Andy. So just a quick introduction to Formby Festival. Formby sits on the Sefton coast. It's part of a 20-kilometre stretch of coastline, so it's the biggest thing we've got in the UK. It's a bit of a strange one, Formby. It's almost like two separate coastal sites, the way it works and its dynamics. So up at the north of our site, you can see there's a lot of bare sand. It's a really mobile area, this area. The dunes are rolling back here around 4 metres a year. However, as you can see, we've got a car park behind it, we've got woodlands behind it. So up in those areas, we've got something called coastal squeeze going where we're losing that large band of dune habitat, narrowing and narrowing. As you get to sort of the middle area of our site, this is where it sort of stabilises, and we've got some really lovely dune habitat here, sort of our optimum dune habitat. And as we move further south, as you can see, you start to get embryo dunes, and the dunes here are accreting. So the problems in the south are scrub control and the loss of those dynamics. So we'll move on to our notches. So the area we chose to put our notches in was an area we call Nicotine Dunes. It's been given this name because back in the 50s and 60s, the land was privately owned, and around 10,000 tonnes of wet nicotine waste, wet tobacco leaf waste, was dumped here every single year for around 10 years. This has created about 2 hectares of what essentially is a wasteland within our dune system. So it's really stabilised. The front of our dunes look like a dune cliff, and it's not possible for the sand to move back through the dune system. The area also is really low-lying, and we've got this huge bed of nettles. So although the tobacco leaf waste itself isn't toxic, it's had a huge impact on the ecology. It's effectively created a barrier within our dune habitat system. So none of our dune specialist species can live there. None of them can cross it. It's completely impenetrable. So this acted as a perfect site to put our notches in, knowing how mobile in general this area is. However, when we were talked through putting these notches in, we had long conversations with our local council, and eventually it came down to plan consent, and we did need it as it came under engineering. The form itself was reasonably easy. Most of the work for planning went into all of our supporting documents. So as well as a local plan being developed, we consulted with Kempi that helped design these notches, who formed a scope of the works, formed a monitoring mitigation plan. We had a preliminary ecological assessment done to ensure none of the special habitat was going to be damaged, or any of the European protected species would come to any harm. As you can see with the area, there was no there was no chance that was going to happen, as it was completely unsuitable habitat. We also got in contact with our local team for flood and risk management, and they helped us develop a report, again supporting the notches to ensure that this work wasn't going to breach the dunes. We weren't going to have the sea breaching through the dunes. It wasn't going to cause anything like that. And in fact, the works we were doing was actually going to help the dunes build and generally be positive for nature and the community behind it. I'll move into protected species licenses. So at Formby, due to the nature of the area we put the notches in, there was no mitigation needed in terms of protected species, as there was none there. However, further north up the coast, at Ainsdale, there were sand lizards present. So they followed the same procedure that anyone else would, got in touch with the licensing team at Natural England, and put together a document for a strategy for mitigation and avoidance. So through the timings, that worked out that May was the most optimum time. The sand lizards were out for hibernation, so there was no way you were digging them up. Yet they hadn't bred yet, so there was no way we were going to dig up eggs in the dunes. As part of that, the areas of notches were mowed to ensure that any sand lizards wouldn't move into that area, making it unsuitable. And similarly, if through the surveys, any sand lizards were missed, when they emerged from hibernation, they would move out of that area. Local media and national media. So we had a huge engagement plan planned for when our notches were due to take place, which was in January 2021. However, due to COVID restrictions, it put a huge stop in our plans. We couldn't invite the local community in. We couldn't organise any events, any talks. It became really restricted in what we could do. After an initial panic, we decided to make a plan. So with our local Marcoms officer and our senior external communications manager at National Trust, we put together a press release detailing a little bit about the history of the site, the project itself, and exactly what the notches were going to do and how it was going to benefit. And we sent it off, and we thought, okay, a couple of local papers might pick this up, but it might have been a slow news day. But it was picked up by national press. We managed to get out into the Guardian. BBC News picked it up. Country File took us on, as well as our local news, and doing live radio, which honestly was the most terrifying thing I've ever had to do. But it made a huge impact, and we managed to get our story out of what we were doing and why, not only to the local community, but wider as well. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name's Rupert and I'm going to tell you about the notches at Bronson Burrows. After 3 years of seeing you all behind screens, it's really nice to have all your bodies here in 3D, and I've managed to change my pyjama bottoms today for you as well. Happy days. So my first slide, I'm going to take you right back to the 1940s when there was 13,000 US troops here. You can see the bare sand dunes, and some of you may recognise the building at the back. That's actually the hotel we're sitting now, painted green to stop it being bombed, basically. And again, you can see bare sand dunes, lots of activity. High bare sand dunes that we don't see anymore. So I was told that all the white sand and bare sand was created by the army. So I was really pleased a couple of months ago to find this picture, which was taken before the troops were here. That's 1940. And I've just marked in the fore dune, in the area of bare sand, probably about 60%. So a massive contrast with what it is now. So this slide shows you where the notches are. So we're talking about 4.5 kilometres down the beach from where we're standing now. So it's a really big site. And you can see there isn't much bare sand there. You can see there is a natural bit in the middle there that you can see. And then you can see the works we did last year, the scrapes at the bottom. So we've made quite a difference. And then obviously we've done it again this year, so we've doubled the area at the bottom. So I'm going to show you all that tomorrow. So having all those troops, started or not? Hey! So having all those troops here, they left a lot of munitions and a lot of ordnance. So that made my job quite exciting. We were really fortunate that we got the MOD to come in, and they took on looking for the UXO. I think Dave Lincoln's here today, so we want to thank the Army and especially thank Dave who brokered the conversations to get the MOD here. They spent about £1.5 million over the last 18 months clearing ordnance. Thanks a lot, it's really appreciated. We wouldn't have been able to do so much work without them. So there was 33, over the last 18 months, we found 33 live ordnance which had to be blown up. And yes, they did let me blow a couple up. And over 1,000 expended. So here's some of the things that were found. Oh, sorry, no, this is Graham here. So this slide's just to show you what they did. They put down 50-metre lines and then they walked between them and they shirked every square inch, which is clearly very easy on that short turf. But once you get into the dense scrub, we have to get the contractors in first, clear that before it could be scraped or turned into notches. So that's got obviously a two-stage process, made it more expensive. There was about 25 MOD staff here for the last 18 months. So yeah, here's some of the things we found. There's a nice block of TNT, Corps of Engineers, and that says USA, and then it says high explosives above. So that's another thing that went up with a bang. Here's a bazooka rocket at the bottom. We found about 170 of them, and then rifle grenades, another about 170 of them, and that's the top of a landmine. So, most boring slide ever, but this was really exciting for us. This was our planning approval that we got on November the 17th, and there was one major condition on it, which is an archaeological one. So when we were doing the notches, they wanted to make sure that we didn't dig up any things of interest from World War II, in particular the concrete pillboxes are the main things that we find. So that was a chance really for us to engage with the community. So we found some budding archaeologists, and Dave very kindly invited them to the Chibnall Air Base and showed them some of the finds we've made in the scrapes. They get really excited about rusty bits of metal, these guys. But that's what it would have looked like, a Cornwall tank. So there's now plans to clean that up and weld bits together and then take it back onto the dunes where we found it. So that's a really nice legacy that will come out of the project. So once the archaeological condition was out of the way, away we went. So they're 14-ton swing shovels, they're quite big machines. The contractor was really worried that he wasn't going to be able to move sand fast enough and make any money on it. But actually it went very smoothly. They started off working together until they got the hang of it. And I think that's notch 3. And then they separated and started working down the coast. There's my dog Mabel, just making sure they're going on okay, expecting work. Oh, there's our budding archaeologists. They managed to find a map from World War II with locations of different things, so they got really excited looking around the site, and they got the MOD involved as well, like helping them to look for things. So they had a really great time. So it started working straight away. There was sand moving up the notches as we made them, covering the vegetation. So it's exciting to see the results straight away. So that's notch 1. You can see all that nice, new, fresh sand there. And then that's the scrape inside. So the sand's moving up the beach, through the notch, and then going out onto that scrape. And then there's 3 more notches inland. So the next photo is looking back this way from where I took this photograph from. And put that arrow there, so that's where I was standing, and you can see that lobe of sand that's already moving inland. It was a little bit of a challenge to decide where to put the fence because it's all fenced in for the livestock. So deciding where to put that fence, and hopefully I've got it in the right place. It still seems okay at the moment. So this is what it's like. Hopefully it won't be like this tomorrow. If it is, bring your goggles. So last week I went down notch. Sean's laughing. I went down notch A, the first notch that we did, thinking I was just going to be able to drop down to the beach. But there's been some big storms and some big spring tides, and it made this about 3-foot cliff. So I thought, oh, no problem, I put it into reverse, let's start to go backwards. But I didn't, I just dug in because all that new sand's all been deposited there, it's really soft. So I was stuck there. But luckily I had John with me, who's very cool in these situations, and he helped me make a nice ramp down, and we managed to escape all right, didn't we, John? So, but it just goes to show how dynamic it is down there. There's a lot of sand moving, there's cliffs forming, and it changes from, almost from week to week. So I'll last some flowers after all that bare sand. So this is one of my favourite pictures I've taken of Bronson Burrows, not just because Andy's in it. But Andy's going to speak to us this evening about what does the bare sand allow and the relationships with biodiversity and abundance. So that's going to be this evening. So one of my questions is, how do we keep the sand moving and maintain the notches? We heard from Luke. So one way is to bring the contractors back in. Of course, that could be quite expensive. So again, more conversations with Dave here. Perhaps we can get the MOD to start using some of those notches. They're here because it's difficult driving terrain, steep slopes and loose sand. So yeah, there's definitely conversations to be had there. And the other thing, of course, is the public. The largest area of bare sand on Bronson Burrows is basically formed by the public. That used to be about 30 metres high. It's a flagpole base, and it had a red flag in it when they're doing live firing. So we need to entice people out 4.5 kilometres down the beach to the notches. Maybe we can put a Cornwall tank down there and entice them down. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much to Izzy and to Rupert. I was very lucky last week to go up and see the notching work that's happened up at Sefton. It's really interesting to see what it looks like after it's been done, and we're looking forward to going up tomorrow, see if it's sunny tomorrow afternoon, go and see what's been going on. I'm going to talk a bit about the engagement work for Cornwall. So we haven't done our notches yet in Cornwall, but we've got plans. We have 2 project sites in Cornwall, both on the north coast. So we've got Penhale Dunes, the furthest north there, and the Towans Dunes, Towans being the Cornish word for sand dunes. That's the southern site there, both on the north coast. You can see they're both quite thickly vegetated. So before I was involved in the project, it was identified that they were good sites to do notching work. So they're the biggest dune systems in Cornwall, multiple landowners, multiple land uses. And there has been marram grass planting happened in the past. So that's in some people's memories. And other sand dune systems in Cornwall have different problems where they perhaps have lots of tourist pressure and they struggle with lots of trampling and sand being blown away and dunes being worn away. So it's sort of we feel it's quite important to tell people what we're doing and why we're doing it and give people a chance to engage with the project, because understandably people might be quite worried if they see these big diggers turning up on the dunes. So engagement work then. So the towns, so this is one of our sites, and I thought I'd try and sort of convey how many people live in and around the towns and how busy it is. So you can see there's quite a lot of okay, so it's basically that whole sort of orange area plus the sort of gap there. That's all the town's dunes, and you can see there's quite a lot of buildings and roads all around it. The various coloured shapes that I put on there, I thought I'd just highlight how much is going on. You've got holiday parks, you've got campsites, pubs, cafes, car parks. So a lot of activity around there. So obviously, it's not, if you cut notches, you're not going to do it and nobody's going to see it. People are going to see it, people are going to be wondering what's going on. So we really want to make sure we engage with people. And we've been doing lots of other work with people by the Dunescapes project. There's a town's ranger who's had a contract to do practical work with people, and we've been putting on engagement events. And we think, I think it's fair to say, the work has been positively received by the community so far, so we want to build on that. However, there's another slight complication with the town site. So we have, when I say we, Cornwall Wildlife Trust, who I work for, have a nature reserve within the towns called Upton Towns, which is roughly where that big kind of factory symbol is. We put that on there because there used to be an explosives factory there. So that was in action for about 30 years, finished about 100 years ago or so. And they were making things like dynamite for mining and also explosives for big Navy guns on ships. So there was this sort of network of buildings and pipes and into railway tracks and things around the site. So it's now a scheduled monument, and this only happened in the last few years. So that's quite a big change for Nick, who unfortunately he's ill, he can't be here today, but he is the site manager, and obviously that's something you've got to then consider if you're managing the site that it's a scheduled monument, the whole site is a scheduled monument. So unfortunately, we have heard recently that we're not going to be able to do the notching there because it's basically digging up a scheduled monument. So it's interesting sort of conflict of interest between trying to get Trip SI, have more sand, trying to have a scheduled monument that you're not supposed to dig up. So we'll see what happens with that site. It could be, maybe Nick's already mentioned that maybe looking forwards, there are other areas of the towns that this nature reserve isn't the scheduled monument where we might be able to do some work in the future. So we will still obviously be doing engagement work. We're still doing lots of work at towns, but just not notching. The Penhow Dunes is the other site, and you can see the area in green there on the left is the biggest dune site in Cornwall. And again, lots of different activity in and around the site. The biggest sort of tourist area is Perranporth at the south of the site. So very, very busy in the summer. But we've also got, on the right, you can see different landowners. We've got a small area at the top that used to be an army camp. But the rest, in yellow, the green, big green area is owned by the Ministry of Defence, and that's another training area. Not quite as much in the way of explosives and things as Rupert's got on his site, but it's a training area. It's currently used. And John, who's the site ranger for Penhow Dunes, works with them very closely on how to manage that site, as well as with the other landowners. So Perrin Sands Holiday Park, the area in orange, is publicly accessible, so lots of people using that. The golf club down there, and then Perrin Zabulo Parish Council own the purple bit. So lots of people using that area who are from Perranporth, tourists visiting Perranporth. So again, lots of people in and around the site, lots going on. So we want to engage with those people, tell them what we're doing, why we're doing it. This is where the notching is going to happen if it happens. John's put in a planning permission bid recently, so we're waiting to hear what happens with that. But if we get the go-ahead, that's where it's going to be. So it's actually quite a long way from the settlements, a long way from the roads and other infrastructure. So it's quite a nice spot to do it, where we've got permission to work with the Ministry of Defence. They're happy for us to do it there. and there's lots of room for the sand to blow around. So quite a nice site. Do it, and from an engagement point of view, we're not having to tell people, oh, the sand might be blowing around near your house or the road or wherever, because it's quite out of the way. We have already done some kind of similar work, not notching, but some of the turf stripping work. So there was an opportunity came along in 2021 when one of the regiments got in touch with John to say they wanted to do a training exercise on the dunes using these big diggers that you can see here. So basically practicing, getting their time in these vehicles, how to drive them, how to maneuver them. And the idea really there was that maybe they could do something useful from a conservation point of view while they were doing their training. So John spoke with them and they cleared, you can just see where they are lots of bare sand. So they cleared an area of bare sand. Cleared some blackthorn scrub that was there. And that gave us an opportunity to take pictures of big vehicles in the dunes. John, perhaps not your favourite day, this, John, but did this interview with Cornwall Live, and we had a press release, and we had lots of social media work going out there, telling people, look, bare sand in some places is a really good thing, you know, and even if you see a big digger in the dunes, that can be a good thing for wildlife and for conservation. So that was quite a good opportunity. We got lots of positive responses, very, very few negative responses from that engagement work. So that's encouraging. And they actually came back last year and did some more, and hopefully they're going to come back again this year. So that was all very encouraging. With regards to the upcoming work, we're already sort of telling people what we're doing, because we want to put information out before the work happens, as well as during it and then after it, giving lots of people a chance to engage and ask questions. So there's various different ways that we're doing that. Now, one of them is things like magazine articles. So this is from the recent spring Cornwall Life Trust magazine. So we've got a 4-page article in there where we're saying all about the Dunescapes work, including about the notching, including the fact that there's going to be big diggers, hopefully in the dunes, moving things around, and that we think that's a good thing for wildlife. Also things like volunteer emails and newsletters. So we have various volunteers who work with us and keep sending out information about what's going on, what events are happening, and including information about the notching work, so that, you know, hopefully these people can help us to tell other people what we're doing, why we're doing it. Press releases, so like I say, we did a press release for the military work before, so we'll chat with the Emmas about maybe doing something for our notching work. And then obviously social media. So we use social media quite a bit to tell people what we're up to. This is an example on the right of our visit to Formby and to Ainsdale last week. And, you know, we seem to be getting quite positive responses when we're putting all this information out there and telling people what's going on, why we're doing it, even with the pictures of the big diggers and all that kind of stuff in the dunes. So all that sort of stuff we can do when we're not even on site. We can do it before, we can sort of warm people up a bit to the idea. But then also we can do stuff on site. So the sort of sign in the middle there is an example from some previous work that we've done. And we've been putting out signs when there's machinery on site, when there's contractors on site, with the idea of kind of, this is what we're doing, please make sure you're safe, and this is why we're doing it, so people can understand the reasons for the work, and giving them someone to contact if they want to ask questions about what's going on. So we'll put signs out on site. We're also doing things like guided walks. So I think this was some university students that came, and myself and John brought them around. But we'll also be doing walks to the general public and just, you know, giving people a chance to come out, see the site, ask questions, talk with us. And hopefully, you know, that sort of combination of different ways that we engage with people means that everyone gets a chance to kind of discuss what's going on. You know, a lot of people that we work with, volunteers, really care about these places, and understandably seeing big diggers roll in might be quite unnerving. So, yeah, hopefully the engagement work is going to be useful from that point of view for us and helpful to other people. So, fingers crossed that we get our permission for Penhow Dunes, and then we'll be out and about, and hopefully this summer we'll get some notching work done at Penhow. Cool. So, I think that's all of our presentations for this bit, but we're going to do a question and answer session, yeah, which is going to involve us switching microphones on and off and bits and pieces. So if you just bear with us a couple of minutes, we'll get that sorted. Thanks very much.
Okay, for you, I'm going to shout because our microphone isn't working. So the first question from our online attendees is, will notches not worsen coastal flooding?
I think I showed that most of the sand goes inland, so it strengthens your dunes. When you have a fixed dune, and we have those dikes, there's erosion also at the front of the dike, and the sand is taken away to the beach and to the foreshore. So we are thinking that this approach, but of course we have our measurements in front of that situations, that the sediment is coming in by man also. So there's a different situation than here in the UK probably.
Yeah, so similarly with Hawley, as well as having a report commissioned by a flood and coastal risk management team, which showed that it's not possible. The area where we had it done was a really low-lying area of dune. So by opening it up and allowing that wind-blown sand through, it rebuilds that habitat. So we're getting stronger and healthier dunes. You've got to remember that the dunes they're on natural sea defence. If they're healthy, they will work as a perfect natural sea defence.
Did you want to add anything? No. Yeah. Probably worth mentioning that we've had geomorphological surveys done, and those have identified the best spots to try this process out, and you perhaps wouldn't just do it anywhere without having that kind of research done beforehand.
Okay, brilliant. So I'm still going to yell at you, I'm afraid. So our second question is anyone considering using RGB or LiDAR drone-based photogrammetry to monitor change over time and for use in engagement work?
Yeah, so we already are. We've had a LiDAR survey done, commissioned by Ken. He did our original survey. We've had an aerial survey done using drones that has patched hundreds of pictures together to create a huge image. That was initially after it's done. And they're planning to do one annually, so one is due to be taken again. This can be monitored then on GIS, can be seen and measured. And we also do use it for irrigation work, so those pictures and those videos of aerial photography and those drone videos have gone out on our social media. So where you can see the whole landscape, you can see exactly how it fits into the landscape, gives you a better idea of what we've done and why.
Yeah, a similar situation at Bronson Burrows. We haven't done our post-drone photos yet, so yeah, looking forward to getting those done and be able to see it from above, see the difference.
I know we've had some drone work done as well in Cornwall. Not my patch today, not my job, but yeah, I know John and Nick.
Brilliant. And finally, from our online attendees, any examples of notching being used effectively on modified systems with low sea defence walls across frontal dunes?
We only have high.
I think that might be difficult if you've got a wall that would block the flow of sand from the seaward side. I'm not sure that would work very well.
So it would work like some of the ones that you've made inland. You build dunes behind the wall, but we all work on sites where we don't have those hard engineering sea walls and things like that. So it's not something I've had to look at.
Do we have some questions from in here as well?
Hi, it's Cass Hewitt from Natural Resources Wales. I'm just interested in what you were saying about not having to dig too deep with your notches. And so are you saying that you can dig quite a narrow, a shallow notch high up in your sand bite, and then the natural process will erode that down nice and deeply?
Yeah, that was the idea that nature does the work. So you have to look, of course, afterwards what your roots, how deep your roots are, and if they are resprouting. So when you do it in a relatively cheap way first year. You have to do some aftercare management afterwards. So, but in total, it's cheaper to let the wind do the job.
Yeah, so maybe you could do more smaller ones along the top.
We're still not ready yet. Still not ready yet. It's an ongoing process. We're learning, and there still will be notches planned in the near future. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting way of doing it.
Hi, it's Nick Thomas from Natural Resources Wales. I was just going to ask about how important offshore sand supply is to the success of some of these notches. Have you got a view? Because I appreciate in the Netherlands you're putting a lot of sand on the beach, but elsewhere, is the offshore sand supply really important, or does it matter?
It's a difficult relation with the nourishment because you don't want to have too much sand because you get building up from embryonic dunes and four dunes in front of your notches. So, in fact, you need kind of eroding coast to start notches in a natural way. And what we are now debating with the national government is that we really want to make notches first and let them work, and then nourish on the foreshore, and that sand will come in by the years when the notches already work. So that's the things we want to develop in the next coming years, that there's a relation between the timing of the notches and the timing of the nourishment in the foreshore.
Thanks, Paul Rooney, Local University. As anyone looking at, I know that I've heard some people start to look at this about the sand rain beyond the immediate sand sheets that come in, the impact of these notches in the wider dune landscape in terms of the modifications of the sand rain and the micro effects of opening up habitats there rather than these macro effects.
Yeah, it will contribute, especially in situations where you have acidification of the fixed dunes behind, and you only need a shallow sand grain. You can't even measure it in your height models, but you can see it in the chemistry of the soils and also the vegetation, of course. Yeah, so that's an important. It reaches more land in than I showed on the pictures.
Yeah, yes.
They're all using sand traps. They're all using sand traps.
Yeah, did some research with sand traps, and that's.
Yeah, we'd like to put some sand traps out over the next year or so. We do it as part of engagement as well as monitoring. I've seen it in Wales when I visited.
Sorry, just for those that don't know, sand traps are. How does that work? What's the process?
So the ones that I saw in Wales, in very basically like a bucket. So when the sand moves across, it gets deposited into the bucket, and then you can measure how much sand's moving from up the notches from the beach.
There are different kinds. You also acoustic ones, which you can. There's different kinds of ways to monitoring sand coming in. But there's easy.
Mark van Zul, Amsterdam Dunes, colleague of Luc. We're talking about notches and the effects, especially in the white dunes and a bit in the grey dunes behind. Would it also be an opportunity for you to make blowouts, create blowout development in the dunes behind, in the grey dunes itself, to promote rejuvenation of the vegetation?
So I've drawn a barrows here, where you'll see tomorrow we've done 3 inland notches as well, and they're about 600 metres from the fore-dune. So yeah, we are doing that. I'll be interested to show you and see what you think of that tomorrow.
Yeah, it's certainly something we can look at, especially in the southern part of Thornby. Obviously, where we've done our initial notches up at our north end, where we've got that coast moving back inland. Down our southern side, we were to put them on the foreshore there. They would again just getting bridges in front of them. But we have, I think we had at Devil's Hole, we have a large parabolic dune that sits just behind our four dunes that acts in a similar way as almost like a natural notch, and it's constantly moving and shifting and getting bigger. So it's something that maybe we could look at replicating.
Andy Byfield, so I've been working with Rupert. 2 quick questions, and you may have answered these because you didn't say how I played. One is, what rate you would expect sort of notches to move in land, in the sense of, I think with all these programs over the last 5-10 years, we've been sort of expecting whopping great areas of bare sand to suddenly appear. I suspect it's a slow process than that. And the other thing is, what happens if actual marrow grass sort of gets a hold before the dune's done its movement?
I think the speed depends on the size of your notches and the sand supply on the beach. I saw some notches with a single beach before, so you have no sand coming in, or hardly any sand coming in from the beach. So it very depends, I think, on wind speeds, on rain, so the local conditions. So you can't give an answer for all sides. We were in the Netherlands were surprised with the speed the projects worked. So it went faster than we expected 5-6 years ago.
And have you had any problems with regrowth of sort of embryo tube plants like?
I'm often coming back. Yeah, I'm often coming back from the roots is an issue when you don't dig too deep, and so we managed that afterwards. So we came back again. So for 3 years, and then the erosion got more dominant, and you got things moving. Yeah.
On that, just some of the notches that you've done in Wales, we've got some which are about 10 years old now, and they're not on the scale of Luke's ones. And
That's not mine. The big ones.
Classic, yeah. The Dutch ones, actually. And you said that yours, those big ones are moving, 25 meters a year?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah.
But I think we have to be realistic about what we can achieve here on using the size of the notch, and also, the amount of sand. A lot of our sites don't have that sand supply. We don't have artificial sand supply, and we might have a fairly gravelly beach already. So what we've found is over the years, they moved a fair bit initially, and then they sort of stabilise and vegetate up to some extent. So I think we've, gone from the biggest amount of bare sand, and then over the next 6-8 years, it's retreated back. And Greg, can you remember, was it a third?
Yeah, it must be something like that. And we have the group of Cesius and Amorphila coordinating at the back end of them. But yeah, just retracting it back, just a natural succession. Yes, we had natural successional processes taking over. But essentially, the approach we took, I'm talking specifically now, Rupert, which I manage. So we had 12 notches, at Rupert. Now about 4 of them were on an accreting beach at Penrose at the north end of the site. And those have behaved as you would expect, with more sand moving inland. We've had initial deflation of the notches on the other side of the site that they've quickly widened and just recirculated really the sand at the edge of the notches, and it's now quite fixed inland, but we still have movements at the coast.
To comment, I'd be interested in your responses, really. Whilst with someone who's been marginally involved in the development of these ideas of notches, one thing that perhaps I haven't made enough point of yet, hope to make it on Friday, is that these type of responses are responses to an extreme and unusual, rather an extreme situation that we perceive in nature conservation at the moment because of the values that we put on these places, and that these interventions do involve, to be balanced, habitat destruction. However, they are required because of the values that we place upon other habitats. is that, so there is the question, is the comment, and it's to provoke discussion, right? So is this really a long-term solution? Are we really addressing the causes?
I mean, where we put our notches in it for me, I think we're in quite a nice position to say it hasn't destroyed anything. Obviously, it was a huge wasteland, if you like, of tobacco waste where we had these huge cliffs, which was essentially compost, and sitting on top of that was just thistles and nettles, a huge bed. So when looking at it,
It's great for butterflies. I know that, but yes.
And there will be butterflies there still. So looking at it that way, all we've done is essentially, eventually, will improve that habitat. We will rebuild that sand dune on top of that wasteland, if you like. Obviously, all these things are monitored. They are reasonably new within the UK. I know the Netherlands have been doing it for some years before us, but these are monitored, and there is a monitoring mitigation plan in place for this. We have got baselines, we've taken aerial surveys, we've got NBC surveys that are taken annually to make sure what we're doing is improving that habitat, and if anything needs tweaking or moving, widening the notch, altering its position to get the best effect, and it's something that we can do.